There is so much talk about women's hormonal health, which is great. But even though it's a bigger part of the conversation, most women are left even more confused about what it means for them and what to do about it, which is not so great. This confusion ends now. An award-winning German nutrition scientist created a powerful herbal formula called Hormone Harmony, which combines 12 powerful adaptogens into one single capsule. Each of these ingredients is carefully selected based on scientific evidence, and it's been proven effective in clinical studies for women of various ages and hormonal profiles. And Happy Mammoth, the company that produces Hormone Harmony, is famous for its zero-compromise policy. No GMOs, artificial fillers or flavors, or any other junk. Only science-backed ingredients in amounts that are clinically proven. The company surveyed over 1,500 women to see how Hormone Harmony helped them, and the results are mind-blowing. 86% of women started losing weight, 77% say it improved their mood, and 100% said they're feeling like themselves again. Hormone Harmony has over 50,000 raving reviews from women all over the world, with 98% of them saying they'd gladly recommend it to their friends and family. For a limited time, you can get 15% off on your entire first order at happymammoth.com. Just use the code HAPPYME, HAPPYME, at checkout. That's code HAPPYME at happymammoth.com for 15% off your entire first order.
Hey, it's Paris. You know I love sparkly things, right? Like stars. Duh. And thanks to Hilton and AutoCamp, I just slept under them. Picture me, serving looks by the fire outside my luxurious Airstream, making s'mores with the kids, while a national park is our backdrop. The great outdoors meets Hilton hospitality. That's hot. Explore all the new ways to stay at Hilton.com. Hilton for the stay.
This episode is also available as a video if you would like to see my facial expressions as well as listen to my voice. This is available to anyone who's a member of my Patreon at the $6 a month level. And also, if you would prefer to listen to this episode with just no ads at all, but my voice, that's available to people who join my Patreon at the $1 a month level. You can do either option by going to patreon.com/AnnFosterWriter. The link is also in this episode description. Enjoy! Hello, and welcome to the Vulgar History podcast. My name is Ann Foster, and this is a feminist women's history comedy podcast. And we are in Marie Antoinette Month. So this is a time of year. Well, I guess we don't do it every year, but this year we're talking about Marie Antoinette, her closest friends, her family, and ultimately herself. And last week we were talking about one of her best friends, who was Gabrielle, the Duchess of Polignac. And today we're talking about Marie Antoinette's other bestie, the Princesse de Lamballe. And we established a lot of stuff. I would suggest, you do you, whatever you feel like doing. But these episodes are really kind of building upon each other. And last week we had a special guest, which was Amanda Matta, who was explaining a lot about how Versailles worked when Marie Antoinette showed up there, first as the Dauphine and then as the Queen of France, and how she sort of challenged those structures as she went on. We're going to see these things happening again today, and I'll talk about it. But if you want to get really more in depth into understanding that, then I would recommend listening to last week's episode with Amanda Matta about the Duchess of Polignac. But today we're talking about Maria Theresa Louisa of Savoy, who later, because of her marriage, she became the Princess of Lamballe. And everybody in all of the books I read always just call her Lamballe. So that's what I'm going to call her as well, just for consistency's sake. And so she's a similar age to Gabrielle and also to Marie Antoinette. They're all hot young girls at the same time. They're all sort of late teens, early 20s at the same time. So she's 5 or 6 years older. So Lamballe was born on September 8th, 1749 at the Palazzo Carignano in Turin. Oh, and I should also say many, many, many thanks to Jerry Walton, who's the author of a book called Marie Antoinette's Confidant, The Rise and Fall of the Princesse de Lamballe, which was my major resource for putting this all together, as well as my beloved and always so helpful Wikipedia. So Lamballe was born in Turin. She's an Italian girlie. She was the 6th child and 5th daughter of Louis Victor of Savoy, the Prince of Carignano. So ultimately, she was a princess by birth, and then it changed what she was the princess of later on in her life when she married somebody to become Princess of Lamballe. Her mother, Christine Henriette, was also of noble parentage. And so because of who her parents were, apparently when Lamballe was born, like the people of the town, of the area, lined the streets cheering and singing over the birth of this little girl. And again, her name was Maria Theresa. And we did have an episode a bit ago about Maria Theresa. Marie Antoinette's mother, and that Maria Theresa had a kind of rule that she made all of her children's, like the first grandchild born to each of her children, be named Maria Theresa. This is not one of those grandchildren. This is just a person whose name is Maria Theresa, which is a popular name among Italian people still to this day. I know because there's a listener out there listening right now whose name is Maria Theresa. Hi, Maria Theresa. So this one, Lamballe, which again, I think calling her that will make us like not confuse her with the other Maria Theresas. So she was very beautiful, but in like a striking way. So if you used to watch America's Next Top Model, remember some girls were like commercial and some girls were editorial. And Lamballe was in more like an editorial type way. So she was described as having, people just really love dissecting the faces of young women in this era. But as she grew up, she was noted for, she had irregular features that like on their own were kind of like, what? But when you put them all together, it's like, oh, she's stunning. She had a long neck, a long nose, sleepy blue eyes, a friendly smile. And one of the things people really remarked about her was that she had like a really glowingly beautiful complexion. Even later in life, she was mistaken for being much younger than she was because she had such like naturally glowing skin. You know, people back in the day would be like, drop the skincare regime. But she's like, it's olden times. I don't know. She also had, in addition to her beautiful skin, she also had beautiful, gorgeous, like golden blonde hair. So she was described as being an indescribable blonde hue that just fell in like beautiful waves. She later on in her life, when she became friends with Marie Antoinette, she was painted by Marie Antoinette's friend and painter and previous subject person on this podcast, Elizabeth Vigée-Lebrun. And Elizabeth Vigée-Lebrun, who like knows what she's talking about because she's all about aesthetics, she's a painter. She said that Lamballe had the most beautiful blonde hair imaginable. So just like bear that in mind. She had this beautiful, luscious blonde hair. Someone else said that Lamballe's hair is comparable to the tresses which crown nimbus-like the heads of Raphael's Madonnas. So she just has like cannot emphasize enough this beautiful, beautiful, thick, luscious hair. And so if you think about the friendship group that we've talked about in last week's episode as well, like you've got Marie Antoinette, you've got Gabrielle de Polignac, and then you've got Lamballe. So like Gabrielle, the other friend, like she's a striking brunette, and then Lamballe is like a blonde. So it's like you've got the two, if you've got like your Barbies on the shelf, you've got the different hair colors to kind of like complement each other. And Marie Antoinette had hair, if you're watching this on video, the same color as me, kind of like strawberry blonde. So you've got a redhead, a blonde, a brunette. Like these are our three girls. Although at this point, she's not yet friends with Marie Antoinette, but she will be soon. So she was lovely. She was a beautiful person with amazing hair. And even more so than that, like that would draw people to her just because she like looks lovely. But also she had this really sweet personality. It was said she had a tender nature that seeped into people's souls, overwhelming them, such that most who met her became thoroughly enchanted. So unlike someone like Gabrielle, who we talked about last week, who was kind of like charismatic and like the fun girl at the party, Lamballe was just like nice. She like the word that I want to say and in the most complimentary way, and I apply this word to myself, is basic. She's just basic. She wasn't a flirt. She wasn't like, she didn't have a mischievous glint in her eye. She was just basic. And that made people like her because she was just nice. She was just like, there's no sort of like secret agenda going on there. Like if this is Mean Girls, she's the Amanda Seyfried character who also had beautiful hair, really. So she's just kind of like, she's just nice to be around because there's like not a thought in her pretty head, but she's just nice. She's also, this is just like, it's dragging her, but like just so you get a sense, like she wasn't witty. She was just nice. And I know people like that and I appreciate people like that. She was also very intelligent. She's well educated. And she's also very religious and pious, which is a thing that people liked young women to be in this time and era. So she was married when she was 18 years old, which next week we're going to be talking about Marie Antoinette, who got married when she was 14, which is just so young. So compared to that, I feel like getting married at age 18 is like, you've grown some more brain cells and stuff. Like, I'm okay with this. The person that she was married to, and if you're a new listener, welcome. And if you're a longtime listener, you know that I like to pronounce French words and I with gusto. Will it be the correct pronunciation? I don't know. But as I've said, I am inspired in my French pronunciation by Jerry Orbach as Lumiere the Candelabra in Beauty and the Beast. So I'm going to go for it. Lamballe was married to Louis Alexandre de Bourbon-Penthièvre. She's a princess, right? So she has to just because the way the class structure works, she has to marry somebody who's at a similar level. And he is, Louis Alexandre, was the grandson of Louis XIV's illegitimate, but then legitimized son, Louis Alexandre de Bourbon, the Prince of Lamballe. So he's descended from the legitimized, illegitimate son of King Louis XIV, who is one king before now. At this time, we're in Louis XV time. So basically, this husband is a prince. He's the Prince of Lamballe, heir to the greatest fortune in France. So her family, last week we talked about Gabrielle de Polignac, she was not royal, but she was noble. And her family had a title, but not a lot of money. Lamballe's family is rich. She marries into an even more rich family. So money problems are not happening on either side of the family. And this marriage was actually suggested by the current king, Louis XV. And both families were this is great. This will create an alliance between the House of Savoy, which is where she's from, and the House of Bourbon, which is where the husband is from. And so it was a wedding by proxy, which is a thing where, instead of trying to get everyone's schedules to line up or whatever, you're let's just have the wedding and the bride and the groom won't actually be there at the same time, but somebody will stand in for them and it'll still count officially as a wedding. So she had this wedding by proxy. And then something happens to her that is we'll talk about a similar thing happens to Marie Antoinette, which is when a girl from one kingdom marries a guy from another kingdom, she has to be I am no longer part of this first kingdom. My nationality changes, my name changes. I'm going to only wear clothes from that country now. So she had this wedding by proxy, and then she traveled by carriage over the border between Savoy and France. And so what she did, and Marie Antoinette does the exact same thing when she later marries. Next week, I'll talk about it. But Marie Antoinette was traveling from Austria to France. But so what Lamballe had to do was to leave her entourage, all of her servants and her family, behind in Savoy and then cross over the border. And then she was met by her new French servants and household staff. And I presume she probably also had to do the same thing Marie Antoinette did, is change out of her Savoy clothes and into French clothes and be I'm French now. So this whole changeover happened on a bridge. And so this happens a few times in her life. She's like Amanda Seyfried's character in Mean Girls. She has sort of an ESPN. She has sort of spidey senses tingling sometimes, and she's always correct. So she's pausing on this bridge, switching over between Savoy and France, and she felt a sudden just ominous feeling about her future. Oh, maybe I shouldn't do this. Maybe I shouldn't go there. But she's no, Lamballe, I'm sure it's fine. Do what you're told, because she's a real sort of person who does what she's told. Her passage was fine. But remember, she had to leave behind all of her Italian household staff and servants. So she left. Her former Italian household servants, were going back in their carriage to back to Savoy. They ran into a freak snowstorm in the Alps, and several of them died of exposure. So her ominous feelings were maybe about that. So as part of her whole switching over, she changed, her name was Maria Theresa. And then now that she's in France, she goes by Marie Therese. But she's mostly known because everybody at Versailles just calls each other by their titles as Princess of Lamballe, or just Lamballe, which is what we are calling her. So 1 month after her marriage, she was brought to the French royal court. And she was introduced to everybody. At this point, Marie Antoinette is not the queen. It's still Louis XV, but she just made a good impression on everybody. They're oh my God, her hair is so beautiful. She's so lovely. Look at her long neck. She seems great. But let's talk about her husband, Louis. So he was a fuckboy, literally. He loved nothing more than going out with his bros to an orgy and just fucking everybody. That was his vibe. But when they first got married, I don't think she knew that. And what she noticed was just he's really hot. He's gorgeous. And he was oh my God, she's really gorgeous. They're both just wow, we're both hot. This is great. So when she first met him, remember they had been married by proxy. So he was her husband, but she hadn't met him yet. So when he first went to meet her, he came disguised as a page boy, which is a very later in the story, not the story, but the Marie Antoinette story. We're going to talk about the opera, The Marriage of Figaro. This is very Marriage of Figaro coded to just show up in disguise. Anyway, he showed up as a page boy in disguise, and she was just whoa, that page boy is so hot over there. And she didn't know it was him. And so after he had left, she told one of her attendants, I hope that page boy joins our household. He was so nice and handsome. And then it turns out, surprise, the page boy is your husband. Congratulations, you have a hot husband. Who, as she quickly discovered, a fuckboy. But Louis's dad loved her right away in a real fatherly type way. He is throughout this story only ever good to her. And I wish every woman I talk about on this podcast had a champion like her father-in-law was to her. He was there for her from minute one. He was just like, you're great. Like, you're my daughter now. And this is going to be great. And he really had hoped one of the reasons why they wanted to marry Louis off, this fuckboy husband, was because they thought like, well, maybe having a wife will calm down his fuckboy ways and he'll stop going to orgies all the time. But he did not slow down with that. One of his friends at the orgies was a royal, because he's a royal. Remember, Louis is like the Prince of Lamballe. One of his friends, one of his bros, is a guy who's, I guess, his cousin because they're both descended from the royal family. It's a guy who's a cousin of Louis XVI later on as well. Marie Antoinette knows him too. His name is Philippe d'Orléans, and he becomes important later, both to this story and then in the Marie Antoinette story. And so remember that name, Philippe d'Orléans, who's another fuckboy, bear in mind. He becomes important in the story because he fucks things up, this guy. Anyway, so they got married in Lamballe as just like this basic, nice girl. She's like, I have a hot husband. Like, I've gotten married. That's all that I ever wanted out of life. And everything's great and fine. But just a few months into the marriage, she realizes that he is a fuckboy. And he'd slept with two actresses, I presume, at the same time. And she was devastated because she's really pious and religious and stuff. And even though, as we've talked about in previous episodes, like France at this time, it was super normal for people, or super common for men to have lovers and for women often to have lovers, especially in this like echelon of royals. She was devastated because she was pious and religious and not down for that. She was like so distraught about this. She went to her father-in-law. He comforted her because he's a good person. And at around this time, we've got some health issues going on with Lamballe. And there's not, retroactively, like looking back, I'm not able to diagnose this. And nothing that I read really ever guessed at what this could have been. But she had health problems. And like young women of any age who have health problems today as well, the doctors were just like, wow, that's pretty weird. Don't know what's happening with you. Have you tried not having problems? No one was really able to solve it. She had a chronic issue with fainting. So maybe it's like a low blood pressure thing. I don't know. This is olden days. This is like the 1770s, I think. So the way the medicine works in this time in Western Europe is that it's like, well, the body has four humors. And it's not like this is a disease and this is a disease and like this one is caused by germs and this one is caused by a virus and this one is just like happens to you. It's kind of like any disease you have is because the humors are out of balance, and the best way to cure anything was just to like bleed you and get some blood out of you. So like the doctors are not helpful at this time to her. But she could sit with numerous doctors because she would sometimes faint and pass out and be like passed out for like 2 hours. Like this is, you think about this time period and ladies and corsets and people would faint and stuff. But this was like problematic for her and like distressing for people who saw her. Like I don't know, it's like, maybe it's like a diabetes thing, like an insulin thing. Anyway, the symptoms she had was she would just faint. And she also just realized she had these, I don't know if you'd call it like aversions or like triggers, I guess you would call it. So the scent of violets would make her fall ill. So an allergy, perhaps. And this is more a psychological thing, I would presume, but the sight of a lobster or a crawfish, even in a painting, would cause her to have a panic attack. So that would trigger her as well. So she's just got a lot of things going on. Some haters thought that she was faking this all for attention. I don't believe that, because she is somebody who just wanted to do everything correctly and be nice and kind. And I don't think she wanted attention. Later on in her life, when she became sort of well-known, like spoiler, she's going to end up in Versailles, and she becomes a friend of Marie Antoinette. And so when she becomes like known as sort of a celebrity, like a Versailles celebrity, and people knew that she fainted, some of the haters would play like a mean game called à la Lamballe, which means like Lamballe, where men would dress as animals and then women would pretend to faint into the arms of other men. Like, whatever, people play. People at Versailles are all mean girls, as it turns out. And as I said, all the doctors, no one was helping her because doctors were all quacks at this point. If you're listening to this podcast, who knows about I have a Patreon that you can join. And one of the things on the Patreon if you join at the $6 level, is that every month or so, I release an episode where I talk about movies, costume dramas. And a couple of months ago, we talked about the movie The Madness of King George, which is about King George III, who was the king of England at the time that this is all happening as well. And he had health problems. And that movie is a good illustration of the doctors didn't know what to do about that. They're just like, oh, let's bleed him. Let's blister him. Let's just like, in that movie, one of the people is like, oh, have you noticed like his pee is blue? Does that matter? And the doctor's like, no, like, I don't care about what color his pee is. Let's bleed him. Like the health system, not that there was a system, was not great. And so she was just kind of like dealing with this on her own. She tried every doctor she could find. Like for people who are like, oh, she's doing this for attention. It's like she relentlessly tried to find someone who could help her with this. So she didn't want this to be happening to her. One of the cures that one of the doctors tried was to apply a poultice, like a paste, to her belly button. She also tried being hypnotized. The guy, you know the word mesmerize? It's named after a guy called Mesmer. She met with him or somebody who had studied with him to try if like hypnosis could help. Anyway, so she's dealing with this health symptom. And it's interesting that this all starts happening around the same time she gets married and realizes that her husband is awful. So there could be presumably like stress is exacerbating this, the stress of being married to this fuckboy, Louis. So he was just nonstop orgy, like literally, I'm not being silly. Like he just would go to sex parties constantly, was what he was doing. And he got syphilis because that is a thing that is sexually transmitted. And he was having his own symptoms of illness from his syphilis. So at one point this isn't related to syphilis, I don't think. He just had an accident where he fell off of a horse. He had to have surgery. I don't know, maybe broke a leg or something. And his like body was already weakened from the syphilis. And so it took longer for him to convalesce than it might have taken for somebody else. And Lamballe, bless her little heart, she went to tend to him, and as well as his sister did too. And she becomes an important person in the story too. So it's just like, her husband is terrible, but she's like, but this is my husband and I'm religious and I will tend to him. And because she's just a kind, nice person. Ultimately, Louis died of syphilis 1 year after their wedding. So Lamballe, if you're keeping track, is now a 19-year-old widow and the richest person in France because her husband was the richest person in France. She inherited his fortune, making her wealthy in her own right, like as a wealthy widow. Everything you know about her would surprise you to know that she was like, great, I'm going to go and be a nun now because that appeals to me because I am a basic religious person. And can I do that? But her father-in-law persuaded her to not do that, largely because he just liked having her around. And he's like, can you stay here with me? Like, we just vibe. This is a nice situation. And he was in grief because, his son had just died. And so she comforted him. And he was really into charity in a really legitimate way. Like sometimes rich people in this time and place would just kind of like do charity or pretend like they're doing charity to like look good. But he was the father-in-law. His name is also Louis, I imagine. He did charitable projects. He became known because of all the charitable projects he did as the king of the poor. And she was side by side with him, just helping out because she's like religious in this legitimate way, not as like, calling people whores and like telling everybody to do better. Like she was religious and like in Christian and like a way of like giving to the poor, like a real Jesus, WW Jesus do type way. So he, the father-in-law, got the nickname King of the Poor, and she got the nickname the Angel of Penthièvre, which is the last name of them, and I guess the name of also the region. So as time goes by, so the King of France is Louis XV, and his wife, Marie, died. And so he's like, should I get married again? And one of the names that was suggested was Lamballe, because if the king is getting married, it has to be to like a princess or an archduchess or something like that. And the person who suggested this was Louis XV's daughter, Adelaide. I keep dropping hints, but like we'll talk about her later. Louis XV had these 3 adult daughters who chose not to marry because if they married, they would lose their status as Princess of France, and they liked being Princess of France. And Madame Adelaide, the daughter, she had her own ambitions for herself. She liked being in a position where she could advise her dad what to do. And she's like, well, if we marry him to some sort of like little subservient, demure woman, like that person won't get in my way, like me, Adelaide, of like having this power role. So she was like, let's get old king, who's like in his 50s at this point, I think, to marry this 19-year-old widow, which would maybe also distract Louis XV, who was known for liking young women in a sexual way, but maybe that would distract him so that Adelaide herself could have more power. But anyway, this did not happen. Lamballe herself did not consent to this match. And so her father-in-law, who respected and liked her and is like, again, unusual for this podcast, a good guy, did not allow this to happen. But a marriage he did allow to happen was Lamballe's sister-in-law, Mademoiselle de Penthièvre, was married to her husband's fuck-boyfriend, Philippe de Orleans. So that happened as well. So now we've got kind of these like young in-laws who are friends of each other. And then 1770, so Marie Antoinette, 14 years old, arrives in France to marry the Dauphin, the heir to the throne. And when she arrived, she was greeted by like local royals, like French royals, and Lamballe was one of them because she was a princess. And so the two of them got along pretty much right away. Marie Antoinette was 14, Lamballe was 6 years older, so like in her early 20s. And one of the things they had in common was like having come from another country, coming to France, having to like learn what it was like there, being kind of like an outsider. Marie Antoinette later said that Lamballe, this is a quote, is the only woman I know who never bears a grudge. Neither hatred nor jealousy is to be found in her. Like, again, she's just like not a thought in her pretty little head. She's just basic, nice person. And so Lamballe began attending court more often, I presume, because Marie Antoinette was inviting her more often because she just like felt a vibe. Like Marie Antoinette really needed a friend. And she's like, this person seems nice and like she's not scheming. And she was also just really charmed by Lamballe. She overwhelmed her with attention and affection. And well, I mean, she just like saw that this is a cool person and she wants to be friends with her. And she's 14 years old and a lot of people would behave like that. But part of it too is that Marie Antoinette had grown up. She was really close in age to her sister, Maria Carolina, and she really missed her. And she was used to having, like she and her sister grew up side by side, like arm in arm, like Kylie and Kendall Jenner. She was used to having someone, a young woman around her to be her friend. And so she's just like, Lamballe can fill that void for me. So that might be where some of her like excessive excitement about this friendship comes from. One of the people on the scene in the French royal court, and we're going to hear from him a lot because he's one of the people whose letters a lot of people use as a resource to explain the situation, was the Austrian ambassador, whose name was Count Mercy. And so he wrote, this is like a year after Marie Antoinette had been there. For some time past, Marie Antoinette has shown a great affection for the Princess of Lamballe. The young princess is sweet and amiable, and enjoying the privileges of a princess of the blood royal is in a position to avail herself of her Royal Highness's favor. So what he's saying is that Marie Antoinette really likes Lamballe, but like this is great. This is fine. If Marie Antoinette is going to take a favorite and find a bestie, like it's another princess, like this is appropriate because station is very important in Versailles. 1773. So this is 3 years after Marie Antoinette has been there. Like the two of them, they're besties, they're hanging out. It's great. One of Lamballe's cousins married Louis XVI. So Marie Antoinette is married to Louis XVI. Louis XVI has two younger brothers. One of them is called the Count of Artois. So there's Louis XVI and then his two younger brothers, Provence and Artois. And of the three of them, Artois is like the cool one. He's the handsome one. He's like the charming one. He's the one that some people said maybe he should be king instead of Louis. Anyway, so one of Lamballe's cousins married this guy, the cool brother, Artois. And then because of this, so her cousin was married to Marie Antoinette's brother-in-law. Effectively, Marie Antoinette was like, we're family now. So like we can spend even more time together because we're now related. So they form this kind of close circle of friends, of kind of like the young, cool royals. So it's like Marie Antoinette, her husband, Louis, Lamballe, who is of course a widow, and then Lamballe's cousin and the Count of Artois. Like they were just kind of like the young people together who were kind of chill and had a nice time. During this era, Lamballe was described as being almost constantly by Marie Antoinette's side. Marie Antoinette's mother, Maria Theresa, was not super fan of this attachment because she didn't like royals having favorites or intimate friends. I don't know, because maybe she thought that that would reflect badly on Marie Antoinette, or she thought that this was kind of like in poor taste or something. But Marie Antoinette needed a friend and she had one. And even her mother was like, well, if she has to have a friend, like if an intimate friend is needed, like Lamballe is fine because of her rank. This is fine. 1775. So Marie Antoinette has been at Versailles for about 5 years. Lamballe by her side for most of it. And this is when the king, Louis XV, who Lamballe almost maybe would have married, dies. Marie Antoinette's husband becomes the king, Louis XVI. And so because Marie Antoinette, that makes Marie Antoinette the queen because her husband is the king. And so she's now able to appoint people into jobs. And so she appoints Lamballe the job of superintendent of the Queen's household, which is the highest rank possible for a lady in waiting at Versailles. This office had been vacant for over 30 years because the position was expensive, superfluous, by which I mean unnecessary, and it gave so much power and influence to the person who gave it. Like it gave Lamballe rank and power over all of the other ladies in waiting. All orders given by any other female office holder had to be confirmed by her before it was carried out. It was such an important, but it was a costly job because the salary was really high. But Marie Antoinette was just like, this is my best friend and I want her to have the best job. And so I'm going to give her this job. And just think what we know about Lamballe, who's just like, she's great gowns, beautiful gowns, like pretty hair. She's nice. She's sweet. She's intelligent. We know that. So Marie Antoinette, like, part of this must have been like she knew that Lamballe could do this job overseeing it, but it was also, this is a very controversial appointment because no one had been in this job. And some people thought that Lamballe's health issues maybe would get in the way of her being able to do this. She was also at this point in her late 20s, but she was younger than a lot of the other people who she would be supervising. Those women were annoyed because she would now be supervising them. So people were upset about it, but like, what could you do? Marie Antoinette said to this, and Lamballe is a princess. So like you can say that it was inappropriate. The salary of this position was enormous for the time, is 50,000 crowns a year. And because the Princess of Lamballe was the richest person in France, and because France was in a lot of debt, because again, this is like 1775, they're not quite helping out in the American Revolution yet, but they will. But they have been in all these other wars of France not doing great financially. So they were like, okay, so they're not already doing great financially. And Marie Antoinette is like, hey, I'm re-implementing this job that costs 50,000 crowns a year, this like pointless job. So Princess of Lamballe was asked to renounce the salary. Like, just could you do this as like a volunteer job? But she refused because of the rank and just kind of like, it would be, she always wanted to do everything like correctly. And she's like, it would not be correct for me to do this and not take the salary. She's like, I will either have all the privileges of the office or I will just like step down. And Marie Antoinette intervened and granted her the salary herself. This led to bad publicity because we talked about this in the last week with the Gabrielle Polignac, but there was a lot of haters on site who were looking for any reason to criticize Marie Antoinette. And this made Marie Antoinette look bad and it made Lamballe look like she was greedy. And this is when people started making fun of her fainting spells and suggesting that maybe she was faking it. So here's another hot update from Ambassador Mercy, who's got all the tea. Quote, Her Majesty continually sees the Princesse de Lamballe in her rooms. This lady joins to much sweetness of very sincere character, far from intrigue and all such worries. The Queen has conceived for some time a real friendship for this young princess, and the choice is excellent, for Madame de Lamballe is not at all identified with the interests of Madame de Provence and d'Artois. So they're just saying, even though she's from Savoy, she doesn't have any agenda. She's not trying to push anything on this. Mercy also says, all the same, I've taken the precaution to point out to the Queen that her favor and goodness to the Princess de Lamballe are somewhat excessive in order to prevent abuse of them from that quarter. So Marie Antoinette is just like, this is my bestie and I'm going to give her, there's so many nuances to this. Like the Versailles of it all makes everything really more complicated. But I think we see this happening in like these days in Hollywood or something where somebody becomes a star and then they like hire their friend or their sibling as their assistant, or like they let somebody live with them, where it's just like if somebody suddenly gets all this power and influence, and they're a generous person, they want to bestow that upon their friends. But then it's like, can you trust all of your friends? Are your friends just using you? And in this case, Lamballe is not, but I can see why people might suspect that she was. So Marie Antoinette's mom, Maria Theresa, tried to discourage the friendship because she was concerned that Lamballe, because she was from Savoy, would try to like pressure her to like do stuff for Savoy. But Marie Antoinette is just like, whatever, this is fine. What she said actually is, the Princess de Lamballe's friendship is the charm of my life. So, and I will mention also that Marie Antoinette's husband, Louis XVI, also really liked Lamballe because she's just like a nice person. They just like being around basic, sweet people. And there's not a lot of people like that at Versailles. But Lamballe, although she's like, I'll take this job. If you don't want to pay me, then I just won't take the job. And then she has the job, but she struggled initially with the role and so part of it is that because her rank is she's a princess, was called a princess of the blood, which means her husband was illegitimate son of the previous king. So you're called princess of the blood. So because when you're a princess of the blood, it's not appropriate for you to invite people to events. What she would do is she would just kind of announce that like, I will be receiving on a certain evening, or like on behalf of Marie Antoinette, like Marie Antoinette will be receiving on a certain evening. But it wasn't seen as appropriate for a princess to issue invitations. That was like inappropriate. But this was tricky because part of her job as the superintendent of the household was to invite people to parties. So she's like, well, I can't invite them to the party. I'll just let people know Marie Antoinette will be receiving people. And so, but the guests that they wanted to come were confused. Is this an invitation or not? And so the parties were poorly attended, which bothered Marie Antoinette. And at this point, her other friend Gabrielle is on the scene. And Gabrielle and Lamballe did not get along. Marie Antoinette was like, yeah, this is my bestie. This is my new bestie. You should be each other's besties. And they did not get along at all. Especially Gabrielle, who's got like a bit more mischievousness to her. Like she would try to get in the way of Lamballe. Lamballe is just kind of like, what's happening? Just like blink, blink. So Gabrielle was sort of suggesting that Lamballe was incompetent or she had messed up on purpose to embarrass the queen, trying to get Lamballe to be like on the outs with Marie Antoinette so that Gabrielle could get more power. But in the meantime, Marie Antoinette is just like, you're my two friends. And so we're going to hang out all together because I'm the queen and that's what I want to do. And so we're in 1775. And what was trending at the time was for gals to be pals, for women to have fun without men, which I support. One thing that the girl squad would like to do, like not just Marie Antoinette and her two besties, but like women in general, aristocratic and noble women and royal women, they would like to go on gondolas in the river, just like floating around, just like vibes. One time the three besties were out on the river and some bargemen, like the men who like drove the ships, were like, oh, let's like pretend one of us fell in the river to like entertain Marie Antoinette. But Marie Antoinette thought they were actually drowning and she was really distressed and she was panicked. Lamballe fainted, did not go over well. And so like we talked about last week, Lamballe having this power position of being Marie Antoinette's friend, she was able to use that to help advance her family members. So she had a brother named Eugene, who was her favorite brother, and he was granted a post with his own regiment in the French Royal Army. Lamballe also got Marie Antoinette to give her brother-in-law to become the governor of a place called Poitou. And so this is all happening in Versailles. Like everything's going so well, to quote the movie Moulin Rouge. So Marie Antoinette is just kind of figuring out how to make Versailles more comfortable for her. Like we talked last time about, she started hanging out at Petit Trianon, this kind of like private cottage where she and her friends could have like a more relaxed atmosphere. Meanwhile, back in Paris, the people of the streets, the non-noble people, were starting to really hate Marie Antoinette because the people of Paris, you know, there'd been all this really bad harvests. They were all starving. The French economy was bad. There's like tax issues. And they blamed the royal family for doing this. Like they saw how they were living at Versailles, or they literally saw how they were living at Versailles because Versailles was open like a living museum. Like anyone could go in and just like watch them like it's a zoo. And now for a quick advertising break. Everyone's talking these days about weight loss medication, but fewer people are talking about how hard they are to access. That's because hers is changing that with transparent pricing, expert care, and a personalized plan that's actually built and priced for where you're at. Hers is transforming women's healthcare by providing access to affordable weight loss treatment plans. They connect you with a medical provider who will work with you to determine the best treatment option for you. Whether you want to lose weight, grow thicker, fuller hair, or find relief for anxiety, Hers has you covered. Visit forhers.com/vulgar to get a personalized, affordable plan that gets you. That's forhers.com/vulgar. forhers.com/vulgar. Weight loss by Hers is not available everywhere. Compounded products are not approved or reviewed for safety, effectiveness, or quality by the FDA. Prescription required. See website for full details, important safety information, and restrictions. Actual price depends on product and plan purchased.
You chose to hit play on this podcast today. Smart choice. Progressive loves to help people make smart choices. That's why they offer a tool called Auto Quote Explorer that allows you to compare your Progressive car insurance quote with rates from other companies. So you save time on the research and can enjoy savings when you choose the best rate for you. Give it a try after this episode at progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy. This podcast you're listening to, it was once just a dream. A dream that became reality not by accident, but because someone decided not to let the what-ifs keep them from creating something they believed in. Starting your own business is a dream lots of us share, but too many let it remain just a dream. Don't hold yourself back from creating what you believe in, and turn those what-ifs into why-nots with Shopify by your side. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world, and 10% of all e-commerce in the US, from household names like Mattel and Gymshark to brands just getting started. What if I can't design a website? Shopify's got you with beautiful, ready-to-go templates to match your brand's style. What if I need a hand? Get help with everyday tasks like enhancing product images, writing product descriptions, or generating discount codes with Shopify's AI tools created for commerce. What if people haven't heard about my brand? Shopify helps you find your customers with easy-to-run email and social media campaigns. And what if I get stuck? Shopify's always around to share advice with their award-winning 24/7 customer support. So turn those dreams into and give them the best shot at success with Shopify. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/realm. Go to shopify.com/realm. Shopify.com/realm. Summer really lends itself to a minimal effort, maximum impact makeup look. When it comes to looking and feeling your best, especially in the August heat, sometimes less is more. And when you're working with fewer products, you want the quality to be high, which is why Thrive Cosmetics is your go-to for a simple, clean, and radiant summer look. Every product is 100% vegan, cruelty-free, and made with clean, skin-loving ingredients that work with your skin, not against it. One of my favorite Less is More products is their Brilliant Eye Brightener. It's a waterproof eyeshadow and highlighter stick that comes in 34 shades. The shimmer shades are great for brightening up your inner corners, and they also have really lovely neutral matte shades that, again, can make a really big impact on your overall look without requiring too much product. Plus, for every product purchased, Thrive Cosmetics donates products and funds to help communities thrive. And with over $150 million in product and cash donations to over 600 giving partners, your purchase directly fuels real impact. Maximize your look with minimal effort. Go to thrivecosmetics.com/thrive for an exclusive offer of 20% off your first order. That's Thrive Cosmetics, CAUSEMETICS.com/thrive.
And we're back. So they knew how wealthy and opulent everything was there. And they knew exactly what Marie Antoinette and everybody was spending their money on. And the people were poor. And it's a bit of a 2025 vibe to be like, oh, really? You just like went into outer space with Lauren Sanchez and did your makeup. And it's like, meanwhile, people are like, can't afford, people are living on the streets. It's not so different. So people were understandably annoyed at this. And Marie Antoinette was just really the face of it all. She was not personally responsible, but she was the scapegoat of it because she was a foreign woman. She was a woman, and everything she did was being really scrutinized. And so the more people hated Marie Antoinette, the hate also fell upon her favorites, which included Lamballe. Even though at this point, Gabrielle was much more Marie Antoinette's closer bestie, but because she'd given Lamballe the role of superintendent of the household, which was a lifetime appointment, she couldn't take that away. So Lamballe was still around, but Gabrielle was much more close to Marie Antoinette at this time. Yeah, and so it's kind of like going back and forth who Marie Antoinette kind of needs at which time. Does she need the high energy friend of Gabrielle, or does she just need the basic sweetness of Lamballe? It just kind of depends what kind of mood she's in. Master Mercy reported, this is 1776, the Princesse de Lamballe loses much in favor with Marie Antoinette. I believe she will always be well treated by the queen, but she no longer possesses her entire confidence. He later said he reported of constant quarrels between Marie Antoinette and Lamballe, in which the princess seemed always to be in the wrong. So Marie Antoinette, so she has this like Petite Trianon, which is like this mini castle on the grounds of Versailles where she can like thankfully be more private and she doesn't have to deal with all the Versailles bullshit. And she started, there's a theater, like there's a little theater in Petite Trianon, and Marie Antoinette started participating, like performing in them because she liked dancing, she liked performing. And so Gabrielle convinced her to refuse Lamballe to be able to attend these productions. These are women in their 20s, but living in sort of like a perpetual high school-esque situation where everybody is all together all the time and you're always just trying to curry favor with a popular girl. So it is Mean Girls adjacent that Gabrielle and Marie Antoinette are kind of icing out Lamballe at this time. So 1780, Ambassador Mercy reported, Princess de Lamballe is very little seen at court. But, you know, at the same time, it's kind of like, yeah, there's this mean girl shit going on, but it's also sort of like friendships wax and wane. They just do, especially when you're an adult. So part of where they were arguing and part of where Marie Antoinette was like, maybe I don't want to see Lamballe so much anymore, is that Lamballe, reasonably, she tried to convince Marie Antoinette to not be so lavish and not to spend so much money because Lamballe was aware that like everyone in Paris and most of France really hated her and it wasn't helping things that she was spending so much money. Marie Antoinette was annoyed at being scolded and this is kind of the schism in their relationship a little bit. But Lamballe still has this job of superintendent. So she was in charge of all the other ladies in waiting and stuff. And so most of whom were older than her. So they were like, that was challenging. So Marie Antoinette had to keep intervening between squabbles between Lamballe and some of the people she was supervising. Eventually, Marie Antoinette is just like, I really wish I hadn't given her this job, but I did. And it's a lifetime appointment. So here we all are. And eventually Lamballe is just like, you know what? Why don't I just step away for a bit? Like, it is not sparking joy for me to be here in Versailles. So she went with her sister-in-law to a place called Plombières, which is in modern-day Belgium. And this is a place that was known for its healing waters. So again, Lamballe, it's like, yeah, like the more stress she's under, the more I think her physical like symptoms are manifesting. And so she's just like, let's just go. No doctors know what to do, but you know it's often good for a lot of things, a hot bath. So she went to rest and recuperate with her sister-in-law. Unfortunately, while she was there to recuperate, she caught measles. So this is an era of just like spot-based diseases. Smallpox is everywhere. Measles is everywhere. And so Marie Antoinette, even though they'd had these, like, you know, they were having like friendship friction, Marie Antoinette was still like worried about her. So she sent her, you know, a whole bunch of like get well soon type letters and this kind of mended fences between them. Lamballe recovered and she was able to return to Versailles 3 months later, feeling better and also like besties again with Marie Antoinette. Although Gabrielle is still on the scene and the two of them don't get along, so Lamballe is just like, I need hobbies. I need something to get my mind off of all of this just like friendship drama. And like a lot of people in this era, the hobby she turned to was being a Freemason. So Freemasons. Freemasonry is a organization that is still around today. People who are fans of conspiracy theories know a lot about it. So it's at the point that Lamballe got into Freemasonry, it was just kind of like a place, an opportunity to have small, intimate gatherings with people. And she much preferred small, intimate gatherings to like big, lots of people gatherings. So at this time, many women like her saw this as a way to achieve a better world because Freemasonry was, I don't know, like you get things out of it that you might get out of like a really good church or something, just like a sense of community, a sense of support. And so she liked to go to these Freemason gatherings, which were similar. Like now when you say Freemasons, it's just like, oh, this is like a QAnon or whatever. But at that time, it was just kind of like, this is just like another kind of friends being friends. So it was similar to other like fashionable soirees of the era. There's music, dancing, theatrical performances. And I think this is where it really vibes with her, is that Freemasons did a lot of charity work. They wanted to change the world for the better. And that's what she's all about, just like helping people. Because she had always been very charitable. Like she knew that she was fortunate. She knew she had all this money. And she really felt that it was important for her to give back to people who had less than she did. So she was known to give more than she could afford, often depriving herself of many things. She would also, even though she was like, yeah, I want to still get my salary, but she would pay for some of the queen's expenses herself without reimbursement. Like she was a generous person. So her father had died and he was back in Savoy. And then at this point, her mother died from an illness back in Savoy. Lamballe had not seen either of them for years because when she came to France, she had to kind of like cut all ties with Savoy. She took the death of her mother really hard. Marie Antoinette offered sympathies. A letter that she wrote to her, like this is Marie Antoinette wrote to Lamballe. I wept over your letter. My friend, I long to see you and mingle my tears with yours, for there is no other consolation for such a grief. I embrace you again with my whole heart, as I shall love you all my life. And then this letter, King, Louis XVI, added to the note, you know how much we love you. May God be with you. So after the mother died, the court was wearing mourning for 11 days. And then her father fell ill, because he was distraught from the wife's death. And then he died. So both of her parents died, one after another. But while the father died, Lamballe was obligated to be with Marie Antoinette. Marie Antoinette was at this point about to give birth to her first child. And so what the Versailles rules were for that was that Marie Antoinette had to be in confinement, which meant that nobody could give or receive any letters during this time. So no letters of condolences could get to Lamballe at this time. The birth itself, like everything at Versailles, was witnessed by far too many people. The room was really stuffy. Because it was winter, they had sealed all the windows shut so that no breezes could get in. So the room was so hot. The queen actually fainted partway through the birth. And then obviously Lamballe also did. She had this fainting condition. Lamballe had to be carried out unconscious, crowd surfed out of the room. Later on, this birth went fine, but then Marie Antoinette later got measles. And Lamballe was among the small circle of people who Marie Antoinette had stay with her. I think she was staying in Petit Trianon while she was recovering from the measles. Lamballe was there with her. But when Marie Antoinette got better, she called for Gabrielle. So Gabrielle had not been there. Lamballe was there. And so Lamballe was just sort of insulted that she'd been there with Marie Antoinette during the measles and then was sort of pushed aside for Gabrielle. And just for health reasons, she's I'm just going to take another break from Versailles. This time she went to take the waters in Bourbon-les-Bains. And then she went to be with her father-in-law, this nice guy. He was in poor health and she wanted to spend time with him. And then it's just parent death era. In 1780, Marie Antoinette's mother, Maria Theresa, died and Lamballe rushed back to be with her. So it was Marie Antoinette and her two besties were all just kind of there together during the winter mourning the death of Marie Antoinette's mother. Lamballe had other friends, specifically this 16-year-old girl who she met named Stéphanie Beatrix d'Amblimont, who was Lamballe's lady-in-waiting because she was also princess, so she had lady-in-waiting as well. And Stephanie was energetic, bubbly, and fun-loving. She also tended to speak her mind without thinking. And just like that energy, Lamballe enjoyed being around this youthful energy. In 1781, she's just excelling at her Freemason-type work. Lamballe was made Grand Mistress of the Scottish Lodge of Freemasons. And being the most wealthy woman in all France, she purchased her own home in a place called Passy, which is a village off of the Seine, which is known for its medicinal mineral spring. So she can have a place with her own mineral spring for the health benefits. At this same area in Passy, also staying at the time, Benjamin Franklin, in town from America. He was also there, I think, in that specific region for the medicinal reasons. And Lamballe really liked living there because she could be more secluded. Versailles was so stressful for her. And it was also closer to her father-in-law, who by that point was too ill to travel very often to Paris or Versailles. And she wanted to be with him because he was so good to her. Her health continued to get worse. So she was often unable to perform the duties of her office. She kept consulting every doctor. They were all terrible. One guy who recommended maybe you could put a bed, put the patient's bed, her bed, into a cow stable so that the manure would make the bed smell like manure. And then I'm not sure if then you put the patient in the bed or if you just bring the manure smelling bed in and the patient lies in the bed and the vapors of the manure would cure them. It didn't cure anybody, but these are the sorts of medical advice that she's getting. Marie Antoinette gave birth again, and Lamballe, as superintendent of the household, she was always there when Marie Antoinette gave birth, but Marie Antoinette had not seen her for a while and was shocked at how ill Lamballe looked, her frail, pale appearance. And then the affair of the diamond necklace happened. We will talk about this more in depth in future episodes, but also you could scroll back to find the episode I did about the affair of the diamond necklace. What this was this con woman named Jeanne de la Motte made it seem like Marie Antoinette wanted to buy this diamond necklace, and this guy, Cardinal Rohan, became sort of the intermediary in all of it. And Marie Antoinette had nothing to do with it, but it all fell back on her because it was something that people believed that she was involved with. And it really devastated her, Marie Antoinette, to realize that people thought so little of her. Cardinal Rohan was this person who was involved in the affair, and he was very publicly arrested at Versailles. And that night, Lamballe wrote, "I sat by Her Majesty's bedside the whole of the night after I heard what had been determined against the Cardinal by the Council of Ministers to beg her to use all of her interest with the king to persuade him to revoke the order of the warrant for the prelate's arrest." To this, the Queen replied, "Then the king, the ministers, and the people will all deem me guilty." Her Majesty's remarks stopped all further argument upon this subject. This is Lamballe writing. "And I had the inconsolable grief to see my royal mistress rushing upon dangers which I had no power of preventing her from bringing upon herself." So Lamballe, as much as it's like, not a thought in her pretty head, it's like she gets it. Like she's smart in these ways, and Marie Antoinette was not. Like Lamballe could see, it's like, remember previously, she's like, maybe you should stop spending so much money. People hate you. And then here she's like, maybe you shouldn't put Rohan up for trial because that makes you look more guilty. And she was right. Lamballe was right in this situation. For some reason, and no one knows why, none of the biographies I read know what happened. So the woman who was behind the affair of the necklace, Jeanne de Lamotte, she was arrested and she was put in prison. And at one point, Lamballe went to that prison where the Mother Superior refused to let her in. So had Marie Antoinette sent her there, or was Lamballe going there on her own? We don't know why, but we do know that Lamballe wasn't able to see Jeanne de Lamotte. So she left her some money. The money never actually got to her. So maybe it was just a charitable thing. But the fact that Lamballe, who's very recognizable with her blonde hair and her beautiful skin, it created widespread rumors at the time. People thought that Marie Antoinette had sent Lamballe there for some sort of sneaky reason. We talked last time in the Gabrielle episode about how one of the ways that people who hated Marie Antoinette were trying to make her seem like this horrible monster person were using rumors of lesbianism. Not because anyone had ever seen evidence of lesbianism, but because this was a way to make Marie Antoinette seem just kind of like terrible, because lesbianism was seen as terrible by most people at that time. So there were rumors that Marie Antoinette was having an affair with Jeanne de Lamotte, this con artist. And so to have Lamballe there, and there were rumors that Marie Antoinette and Lamballe were having a lesbian relationship. So it's just kind of like, is this some sort of just like lesbian grifter thing when they saw Lamballe going to see Jeanne de Lamotte in the prison? Anyway, her health continues to deteriorate. So she went 1787 to England. She'd been advised by doctors to go to Bath in England to take the waters, which is more just kind of like medicinal mineral waters. Marie Antoinette personally saw her to wish her farewell, which was unusual. Marie Antoinette didn't usually do this for most people, but because she did this and because everybody hated Marie Antoinette so much at this point and were so suspicious of her, they thought that she was sending Lamballe to England for like spy reasons, to like do some sort of diplomacy spy shit. The main speculation was, so there was a minister who had been in France called Calonne, who was in England. And so the rumors were maybe Lamballe was being sent to England to meet with him, to get him to not publish his memoirs. But in fact, Calonne was not in England at that time, but Lamballe did return with 2 copies of his memoirs. So like, maybe that was a favor she did. I don't know, but she went to England because of her health issues. So she went to Bath. She also went to Brighton, which was another place that had the waters there were supposed to be healing, where you're supposed to bathe in the water and also drink the water to cure illnesses. This was where the Prince of Wales of England, Prince George, known by his nickname, Prinny, who some of you might know about, he liked to go to Brighton. He was there a lot. He also had health issues. And he would go there with his secret Catholic wife, Maria Fitzherbert. And so Lamballe probably met them there because she was a princess visiting. And so she probably saw the royals who were in town at that time. Isn't that interesting? So after the visit to England, her health improved. This reminds me of, we did an episode a while ago about Empress Sisi, Empress Elizabeth of Austria, who also had various health symptoms. And every time she left royal court, she got better. And every time she was sent back, she got worse. So it's like, yes, part of it is like the fresh sea air was helping Lamballe, but part of it is just like being away from this cesspool of toxicity and stress just inherently made her symptoms less bad. So she was able to return to Versailles after this England trip. Her health was better. She could participate more, and the Queen was being more affectionate to her again, partially because the Queen and Gabrielle were kind of on the outs. So it's just like, well, she needs Lamballe by her side now as well. There's so much fucked up weather in this whole saga, which again makes it just feel like very 2025 coded. We're dealing with climate change that is the effect of humans being shitty. They were dealing with just climate change because they were living in a little ice age and the climate was just really weird for a couple hundred years. So July 13th, 1788, one of the most severe hailstorms in recorded history swept across France. The storm destroyed fields and vineyards, plummeted the whole country into darkness. No people died, but lots of animals died, and the grain harvests were destroyed. This storm gave way that was July. So then August, there's a huge heat wave, and Lamballe, among others, fled Paris to go to Western France, where it was a bit cooler. Lamballe traveled incognito because she was famous. Like people had the a la Lamballe game, she had this beautiful, notable hair. But there'd been so many pamphlets about, is she Marie Antoinette's lesbian lover? She was a well-known person. And it just would be apparent that it is her because she would be traveling in this royal way. So she tried to travel incognito, but she was recognized, passed through Tours, but in a good way. The whole city turned out to greet her because somehow, even though the monarchy, the French monarchy, was more and more unpopular, Lamballe herself was somehow not as hated as other people, potentially because of her good reputation, because of all the charity that she had done. Many saw her just as somebody with sound judgment who offered good advice to the queen, which was true, unfortunately. So she stopped in Tours, and it's wow, this is so great. Everyone is nice to me here. But then everybody got food poisoning. This was because a ragout, French dish, had been left out to cool in an uncoated copper pot, which poisoned the food. Everybody recovered, but when she got home, Lamballe was like, no more copper pots for me. Let's order some silver dishes. Don't want to get food poisoning again. Meanwhile, her father-in-law, he was ill. He's getting, more and more ill. And she stayed with him, tending to him, doing her charity work, which she tended to, poor people in need. And there's an increasing amount of people in need because of this hailstorm that had destroyed all the crops. But simultaneous to all of this, the pamphlets are getting even more extreme. The pamphlets being Lamballe, even though the people in Tours and some there was still a lot of people who thought that she was an okay person. The pamphleteers were just we sell so many pamphlets when we say that Marie Antoinette and Lamballe are lesbians. So let's just keep doing this. Let's call Lamballe this out of control lesbian nymphomaniac. And then we're getting into the French Revolution of it all, which I don't want to dwell on the specifics of it because we're going to get into that in the Marie Antoinette episodes. But what happened next to her, effectively, personally, is that Marie Antoinette's 7-year-old son died. He'd been in fragile health for several years. He died. Lamballe attended the funeral and then went to Switzerland. I'm going to guess for health reasons again. And so she was out of town during the storming of the Bastille, which is kind of, a lot of people say, is kind of the beginning of the French Revolution. Her father-in-law was feeling well enough to travel, so she went on him to visit northern France, where even though in Paris, riots were breaking out and stuff, in northern France where they were, things were pretty okay. And that's where she was when the next kind of major step towards the French Revolution happened. The Women's March, where a group of market ladies marched from Paris to Versailles and then forced Marie Antoinette and the rest of the family to come back to Paris to live in the Tuileries Palace. But when Lamballe heard that it happened, got permission from her, she was staying with her father-in-law who was ill, and she's I'll stay with you if you need me, but I feel I need to go be with Marie Antoinette, my bestie, who's going through a time. Her father-in-law was that's cool, you can go. So she showed up, she went to Paris, and when Marie Antoinette saw her, the queen threw herself into her friend's arms and caught her up to speed with all the horrible stuff that was happening. And then in the Tuileries Palace where they were living, kind of court etiquette was reinstated. Lamballe returned to her duties as the superintendent. And she was, again, always by the queen's side during her card parties and at dinner. When she was meeting with foreign diplomats, Lamballe moved permanently into apartments nearby. And while the royal family was kind of limited in where they could go, Lamballe could come and go. And so she left mostly just to go check in on her father-in-law, who is still sick. And so at Tuileries Palace, she was able to have people over. And so she hoped to gather loyal nobles together to help the royal family so that everything could go back to how it was before. So Lamballe's salon came to serve as a meeting place for the queen and people who the queen was hoping to win over to her side to end the revolution and stuff. At the same time, Lamballe, who's, don't underestimate her. She was also investigating the loyalty among the staff to see are any of them secretly double agents or what's going on. By this point, most of Marie Antoinette's acquaintances, really, not to mention friends, had fled France, including Gabrielle had already taken off. Marie Antoinette was like, Lamballe, by staying here, like, you're going to get, being close to me, you're going to get even more hatred. Like, leave if you think you should. And Lamballe is like, no, I'm loyal to you. You're the queen and also my bestie. And like, let's do this. So the night of June 20th, 1791, Lamballe was playing her usual card game with the queen. Queen bid her good night and said, you should maybe go spend some days in the country for the sake of your health. This was an unusual thing for her to say. And Lamballe was like, okay, I will do that. But also, was that a coded message? And it was. But Lamballe went to her villa in Passy. And there she received a secret note from Marie Antoinette revealing that the royal family was fleeing. They were doing a family von Trapp. They were trying to escape the Tuileries Palace. And so she told Lamballe to meet them in the French royalist supporting town of Waned, which is on the border between France and Austria, and then meet them there, and then travel on with them to Brussels. And so Lamballe was like, oh my God, okay, yeah, no, I'll do that. To hide what she was doing from her staff, because she didn't know if they could be trusted, because the royal family was on the run, Lamballe told them that her father-in-law had taken ill and required her to travel with him, which was believable because that happened a lot. So remember her lady-in-waiting Stephanie, she trusted her, she took her, and a small amount of others, including an armed servant. So they headed out they went to her father-in-law's house for her alibi. But also she just wanted to let him know, this is where I'm going and here's what's up. Wish me well. So she arrived on schedule in Montmédy, but the royal family did not arrive there for reasons I will explain in a later episode. So Lamballe was like, I guess I'll go into Brussels, which is where I'm supposed to meet them. So she wrote to the royal family saying, I'm waiting for instructions. The royal family by now was back in Paris. Again, I'll explain what happened later. So she wrote to the queen saying, if you need me in Paris, I will return. And Marie Antoinette was just like, no, remain my friend where you are. So Lamballe just was kind of just going around doing the hot spring sulfurous water tours. She received letters as she went from Marie Antoinette sent via just a couriers. Some of them were sent in code or lemon juice, invisible ink, or cipher. And every single one of them said, don't come to Paris. Do not return. I do not wish you to come back. It will only put you in danger. But Lamballe was in agony, just trying to decide, should she return or not? She wrote to the king asking his permission to return to Marie Antoinette's side. Marie Antoinette replied herself, saying, no, do not return. Do not throw yourself in the tiger's jaws. The present is too terrible. So Lamballe just kind of traveled around some more. She went to Spa in Belgium to take the waters there. She went to Bath in England again. And because of all this traveling she was doing, and because of people just being suspicious and rumors, same as now, it was hard to know what was true and what was not. So Paris newspapers heard about all the places she was going, and so they spread rumors that she was being sent on secret diplomatic trips to help the royal family escape or something. In October 1791, the revolutionary forces created a new French constitution. And one of the things it said was that the queen had to set her household in order and to dismiss all of her employees who were not currently, it's you can't work from home anymore type document. So she wrote to Lamballe saying either you need to either resign your job of superintendent or return to my service. And this is different biographies I read had different takes on this. Some were suggesting that Marie Antoinette didn't mean this because she'd said so many times, don't come. So she wrote this because she had to. But also another biography I read suggested that Marie Antoinette really needed her support there. She was really in crisis, and some of her advisors really pushed her to do this, knowing that this would be helpful for Marie Antoinette. Lamballe struggled. It took her 2 weeks to decide what to do. And ultimately she did decide to return to Paris, but she would not take her ladies in waiting with her because she didn't want to put their lives at risk. She's putting her life at risk. Before she returned to Paris, she wrote her will. So she knew she's walking into a situation that could end with her death. In her will, she left her fortune and her belongings to her nephew and her father-in-law. And she also provided a pension for her hardworking doctor, and also pensions for her two beloved ladies in waiting. And what she said was, the queen wants me. I must live and die near her. And as of November 4th, 1791, she was back in Paris. And Lamballe brought with her a gift from Marie Antoinette, which was a spaniel named Thisbe, I think, a name that means it signifies faithfulness to death. Marie Antoinette renamed the dog Mignon, which means cute. And like when Lamballe had returned that other time and Marie Antoinette was like, oh my God, you look so sick. Lamballe was like, oh my God, Marie Antoinette. Like Marie Antoinette, she hadn't seen her for a while, but her hair had turned white. Like her hair used to be like my hair color if you're watching the video. Like reddish, goldish. But from the trauma, Marie Antoinette's hair had turned white. It was really thin. She looked haggard, worn, and tired. I'll explain. You'll understand why when we get into the Marie Antoinette episodes. But she was having a real time. And Lamballe was just like, I'm here for you, girl. I'm here. All the mean girl shit was forgotten. Lamballe resumed her job, superintendent of household, and she was one of only 5 remaining women working for the Queen, where there used to be like hundreds of people. So she worked tirelessly. She was just like, this is my girl and I'm going to help her. So she worked to rally supporters for the Queen. She wrote letters to like a lot of the nobles, like Gabrielle had like left France. And she wrote letters to those people asking them like, please return to France. Like, please show that you support the Queen. But like everybody hated Marie Antoinette. Everybody hated Lamballe. Every time they went outside, people yelled insults at them. Pamphleteers were just like thrusting pamphlets at them about like how awful they all were. And Lamballe was especially mocked and for returning to the Queen's side, for like clearly choosing to support this person who is so unpopular. But she was able to come and go from Tuileries. She went to visit her father-in-law. He was even more ill, but still kicking it. But he was more worried about her than he was about himself because she was in such a dangerous situation. On June 20th, a mob broke into the Tuileries Palace and like wanted to kill Marie Antoinette and everybody. And Marie Antoinette immediately wanted to go be with her husband, but Lamballe was like, no, your place is with your children. Then they kind of like hid behind sort of like a barricade made of furniture. Like Lamballe is like living through these situations and she's not fainting, which is interesting. So maybe all of the taking of water had helped her, or maybe, I don't know, people know about medical things, like maybe the adrenaline is doing something. Anyway, so the mob broke into Tuileries Palace twice. The first time Lamballe and others hid behind like this barricade of furniture. The second time was more serious, and the royal family, including Lamballe, they went to take shelter in another building. And then Lamballe and the royal family were then sent to live in a place called the Temple, which is just kind of like an abandoned castle in Paris. With not a lot of rooms. Lamballe shared a room with the Queen and her young daughter, Marie-Thérèse. Mignon/Thisbe, the dog, was also there, along with another dog, the king's dog, a Blenheim spaniel called Coco. And then 9 days later, so they were in this place, not the temple, for 9 days. Officers arrived because they had been ordered to remove all of the servants to put them into like prison. This included Lamballe. And Marie-Thérèse, Marie Antoinette's daughter, wrote her memoirs later. She survives, spoiler, Marie-Thérèse. So she later wrote, she remembered how strongly Marie Antoinette objected to Lamballe being removed. Marie Antoinette was just like, no, Lamballe is a family member. She's a cousin to the king by marriage. Don't take her away. Thérèse wrote later, it was with difficulty that my mother could tear herself from the arms of the Princesse de Lamballe. Marie Antoinette then whispered to another woman who's there, the governess, was like, please look out for Lamballe. Lamballe fell to her knees, reaching out to kiss the Queen's hand, but the guards stopped her. And then she and the other servants were taken for individual interrogation. Basically, I mean, it's all just bullshit anyway, but it's just like, ostensibly it was for treason. Like remember she had the salons where she was inviting people over. It's like, were you involved in the family trying to escape? Like, have you been scheming? It became clear that they would not be returned to the royal family, and Lamballe took the hand of this governess, this other servant who was with her, and said, I hope in all events that we shall not be separated. But in fact, they were. So the women, servants, were taken to La Force prison, where at first they were put in separate cells, but then they were put together in the same cell. The other women who were there with her survived. One of them, Pauline de Tourzel, wrote, Lamballe bore her sad lot perfectly. Sweet, good, and obliging, she showed us every little attention in her power. She said the kindest things to us every day, expressing the happiness she experienced by having us with her. And the women were in prison, but it's like they kept busy. They did needlepoint, sewing, or reading. She didn't have any of her panic attacks or fainting spells at this time, and she just worried all the time about the royal family. The guards were not allowed to tell them what was happening. She received letters from her beloved father-in-law, which raised her spirits because he was working tirelessly behind the scenes to free her, calling in every favor he had. He sent messages every hour to check on her. And that's letters. It's just not phones. He also tried to bribe. So the Commune is the name of the organization, the government at the time that put her in prison. He tried to bribe them, but they refused to let her out. And then I couldn't find much more about this, but a mysterious Englishman arrived and who helped smuggle Pauline Tourzel, one of the other women, out of prison. But Lamballe was too recognizable to be able to escape without attracting more notice, her famous blonde hair. And then, 6 a.m. on September 3rd, 5 days before Lamballe's 43rd birthday, 6 armed jailers entered her cell, asked their names, and then left. She was frightened and suspicious, so Lamballe climbed onto a ledge to peer out. There's just like a little tiny window really high up to see what was going on inside, and she saw that there was like a scary mob outside calling for justice. Someone from the mob, through this tiny window, recognized her, I guess her blonde hair, and threw a rock that actually hit her cheek at the window. 11 a.m., a jailer forced them out of their cell. They were brought into a courtyard to wait with other frightened prisoners alongside shabbily dressed drunken men. What was happening is this is called the September Massacres. This is when a mob broke into a bunch of prisons and killed a bunch of prisoners. That is what this is. So Lamballe and the governess, her friend, Madame de Tourzel, found a quiet spot. Tourzel, who survived, later wrote, "We clasped each other's hands, and I can state positively that Lamballe displayed much courage and presence of mind, replying without hesitation to all the questions put by the monsters who joined us for the sole purpose of contemplating their victims before leading them to death." So what was happening at this prison, La Force prison, is that just a bunch of mob people had declared themselves a tribunal. And then each prisoner was brought before the tribunal, and then the tribunal would decide if they would live or die. And this is not a guillotine situation. This is a situation where if the tribunal decided that you would die, then you were just thrown out into this courtyard where the mob itself would kill you. Maybe they had weapons. Maybe they would just like kick you. You'd be torn limb from limb. This is not the Paris revolutionary government doing stuff. This is like mob purge shit. So the prisoners were just like, what is even happening? So word spread that if they wanted to survive, in order to not be murdered by the mob, they had to avoid any sign of loyalty to the king and queen. They had to get rid of any rings or medallions or trinkets or anything that might hint that they were loyal to the king and queen. Lamballe, so the other woman, Pauline de Tourzel, managed to escape. I think the same secret Englishman showed up. Who is that? The Scarlet Pimpernel? I'm not sure. But Lamballe is taken off to be questioned by the quote-unquote tribunal. It was 6 men, and they ordered her to swear that she loves liberty and equality and that she hates all kings and queens. Her father-in-law, who's just like, again, like he's doing everything he can. Somehow there's a person in the room who had been sent by the father-in-law, or who the father-in-law had told what to say. And so this guy whispered to her that she should denounce the royal family, like say you don't like the royal family. But instead Lamballe replied, "I have nothing to answer. Whether I die sooner or later is a matter of indifference to me. I have made the sacrifice of my life." And so the tribunal announced, "Let Madame be set at liberty," which means Lamballe thought that meant she was being freed, but actually set at liberty means you were going to be killed. As she headed to the door, her father-in-law's emissary whispered, like, say, "Vive la nation," and you might be saved. But she did not say this. And so Princess Lamballe stepped out into the courtyard where she saw piles of naked and mutilated corpses, limbs, because this was the result of the death sentences being carried out by the mob. And soon she was one of their other victims. One of the killers, one of the mob people who was tried years later, described her as a little lady dressed in white, standing for a moment alone before the mob fell upon her. So her legacy, Marie Antoinette's daughter recalled that when Marie Antoinette heard about the death of Princess of Lamballe, quote, "My unhappy mother did not even try to sleep. We listened to her sobs." Louis XVI said a prayer to Lamballe's soul. So her father-in-law's agents had been told if any harm came to her, they were to follow her body to ensure that it gets a proper burial. So these men, the father-in-law's agents, infiltrated the mob. They saw she was killed by the mob. I'm not going to get into detail, but her head was chopped off. And so they saw her head was put on a pike to be paraded around because she was such a famous person, her famous blonde hair and stuff. So these men followed the people, the pike bearers. They went to like an alehouse and what they were doing with the head is they wanted to take the head back to Tuileries Palace to like on the pike so that Marie Antoinette would see it, because they're like, kiss your lesbian lover's head or whatever. But the people carrying the head on the pike stopped at an alehouse because they were thirsty because it's hot. And so the agents of the father-in-law got these guys drunk and then grabbed the head and then took the head. And they were able to provide a proper burial for the head, allegedly in the cemetery of the Hospital des Enfants de la Patrie in Paris. The day she died, like this day that the mob killed her, the news reached her father-in-law's valet, who hoped that it was just a rumor or gossip and not true, and so he didn't tell the father-in-law. But a few days later, a letter arrived from Paris confirming the news, and the valet was still just like, he can't take it. He loves her so much. He worked so hard to try and help her. So the valet didn't tell the father, but he did tell Lamballe's sister-in-law. The sister-in-law was then tasked with telling the father-in-law about the death. So she got his whole staff to dress in mourning clothes, and they all just stood around his bed waiting, like their eyes were red, they were crying. And then the father-in-law woke up and saw them, and they didn't need to say anything. He knew it was obvious what their news was. He never recovered from losing her. He later said, quote, "I think I always hear her. I always think I see her sitting near the window in the little study where she used to sit from morning till night working for the poor. And this is the angel they have torn to pieces." So her death, as I mentioned, was one of what became known as the September Massacres from September 2nd to September 7th, 1792. And these September Massacres sparked an upsurge in murder and mayhem in Paris. Corpses just lay on the street and became so common that people walked over them without a second thought. So in terms of in media, when there's a Marie Antoinette movie, there's often a Princesse de Lamballe character. So she was played by Mary Nye in the 2006 film Marie Antoinette by Sofia Coppola. She's in the TV series Marie Antoinette, played by Jasmine Blackborough. And also she's mentioned in the 1905 children's book, A Little Princess, by Frances Hodgson Burnett. The main character, Sarah, is fascinated by the French Revolution and recounts what happened to the Princess de Lamballe, her death, to her friend. And that is the saga of the Princesse de Lamballe. As I often do on this podcast when we do a biographical episode, I'm going to score her in 4 categories and then see where that lands her on our Fredegund Memorial Scandaliciousness scale. So in terms of scandaliciousness, it's tricky, like the same as when we were scoring Gabrielle de Polignac. She was such an upstanding person, just like doing charity, whatever. It's like, even the stuff she did, like people thought she was scandalous, all the pamphlets and things, but like nothing. I'm going to give her a 1 for scandaliciousness, and that's because of when she was in the Tuileries Palace, she was like working so diligently to help the royal family, and that would have been seen as scandalous by the revolutionary forces if they knew that she did that. And that's kind of ostensibly the reason why she was killed. Scheminess, I don't like, she did what she needed to do, but she was not about schemes. Like when she was out of her depth being the superintendent of the household. All she wanted to do was just like work for the poor. If only she had been allowed to become a nun in the first place, she would have maybe lived a much longer life. Like she did have scheminess towards the end, again, like trying to wrestle up support for Marie Antoinette. And I respect that and I support that, but that doesn't, I'm going to be benevolent like she would be and give her a 3 for scheminess entirely just for that stuff, because the whole rest of her life was just like, that's not her vibe and there's nothing wrong with that. But she did do those schemes towards the end. Her significance, she's an indelible part of the Marie Antoinette saga. She's always in the movies. She was always advising Marie Antoinette to just like chill out and not be like, people hate you, maybe be better. Like her influence was good. Like, I don't think that she led to Marie Antoinette's downfall. Her significance, like her charitable work, I would think that there's, ripple effects of that later on. Maybe some people were able to thrive who weren't otherwise. She was so significant in the time. Like she was so famous that people were like, kill her, put her head on a pike. She's so famous, people will know it's her. Like she was so famous then. But again, I feel like her actions didn't really, like with Gabrielle got a bit more of a score on this because her actions like kind of made things worse for Marie Antoinette, but Lamballe was only ever helping. I'm going to say like a 3 for significance, just because she was so famous at the time. And that's why she was killed. The sexism bonus is where we give points for people where the patriarchy got in their way and maybe they could have done more without it. And like, she had to marry this fuckboy, but he died right away. So that didn't really get in her way too much. Of all the things that happened to her, I don't think sexism was ever really an issue in her life, but it was in her death because people hated her because she was a woman. She was the royal favorite. There was all these rumors about like her like nymphomania and stuff. So like that's there, but I feel like that's still not a lot. I'm going to give her a 2. This is going to be such a low score. I usually need a calculator, but I can just do this in my head. 9. Her score is 9, which is the second lowest score of anyone ever. The closest people who she's closest to are Madame du Barry, who we talked about before. She has a 15. And then Queen Charlotte, who is a queen at this time in England, has a 1. But like Lamballe, like she's just a sweet little basic, nice little person. Like there's just, on my scale does not reward people like that. But I think being towards the bottom is my gift to her because she was too good for this world. What do they call her? The Angel of Versailles or whatever. Anyway, thank you for listening to Vulgar History Podcast. If you're living in Halifax, Nova Scotia, tonight on September 3rd, Wednesday, September 3rd, tonight at 7 p.m., I'm doing my first ever live podcast recording at the Trident Cafe in Halifax, Nova Scotia, 7 p.m. tonight. If you're listening to this the day that it comes out on Wednesday, September 3rd at the Trident Cafe in Halifax, no need to sign up or register, just show up and it'll be a nice time. I also wrote a book. It's called Rebel of the Regency, The Scandalous Saga of Caroline of Brunswick, Britain's Uncrowned Queen, who is a woman who lived, she's like 20 years younger than Lamballe and Marie Antoinette and all of them. But like there's a lot of, when I mentioned Brighton and the Prince of Wales was there. That was Caroline's husband, even though he was already married to the woman I mentioned, Maria Fitzherbert. And if you want to know how that all went down, it's a fun book. It's funny. It's a biography. And I think you'll really like it if you like this podcast. And you can pre-order it from any bookstore in North America, Canada, or the US. You can find links to order it on my website at rebeloftheregency.com, or you can go to your local independent bookstore and just be like, I want to order Rebel of the Regency by Anne Foster, and they will do that for you. And when you send me a picture or a screen capture of your receipt from your pre-order, you can get some treats from me, like Princess de Lamballe. I am charitable. When you pre-order my book, you can get free membership to my Patreon, so you can see the video episodes and stuff. You can get a free membership to my Substack, where you can read my essays about women from history. And you can also get a Caroline of Brunswick paper doll drawn by Siobhan Gallagher that is so cute and so nice. So you can also get the link to do that. So rebeloftheregency.com, all the links to buy my book. And then also the link is there to share your receipt with me to get your goodies. And my book is also available. You can say you want to read it on Goodreads and on Storygraph. You can also request it on NetGalley if you're a bookseller, librarian, reviewer, journalist, or bookstagrammer or whatever. You can request it there and hopefully you'll get it. And then you can read it early as well. And next week, it's all happening. It's all been building up to this. Next week, Marie Antoinette, part 1. Are you ready? I think I'm finally ready. That's why I'm doing it. So next week, Marie Antoinette, part 1. And I can't wait to share that story with you. So until next time, keep your pants on and your tits out. Vulgar History is researched, scripted, and hosted by Anne Foster. That's me. Editor is Christina Lumagi. Theme music is by the Severn Duo. Transcripts of this podcast are available at vulgarhistory.com by Aveline Malik. You can get early, ad-free episodes of Vulgar History by becoming a paid member of our Patreon for as low as $1 a month at patreon.com/AnneFosterWriter. Vulgar History merchandise is available at vulgarhistory.com/store for Americans, and for everyone else at vulgarhistory.redbubble.com. Follow us on social media at Vulgar History Pod and get in touch with me via email at vulgarhistorypod@gmail.com.
Hi, I'm Brandy Basanti. For the last 15 years, I've starred on one of the most successful reality shows of all time, Story Tours. On my new show, The Real Reality, my guest and I will reveal the real story of what it's like navigating fame and notoriety. Because it's my show, I can do whatever I want. I can say whatever I want. No filters, no rules, no network executives. And I believe that's what the world wants. Raw, real, authentic, and I'm gonna fucking give it to you. Though success is great, being in the public eye can come at a cost. Oftentimes, what you see on camera is not the real reality. On each episode of my show, we'll sit down with a different notable individual from the world of TV, film, sports, or internet fame. We will explore their unique story, what really happened on and off camera, how becoming famous has truly impacted their lives, and what their vision is for their future. In a world obsessed with celebrity, followers, and subscribers, the true story is often lost or even buried. This show will reveal what really happened. This show will reveal what people really felt. This show will reveal what fame is really like. This is The Real Reality. Subscribe now, wherever you get your podcasts.
The Old West is an iconic period of American history and full of legendary figures whose names still resonate today, like Jesse James, Billy the Kid, and Butch and Sundance, Sitting Bull, Crazy Horse, and Geronimo, Wyatt Earp, Bat Masterson, and Bass Reeves, Buffalo Bill Cody, Wild Bill Hickok, the Texas Rangers, and many more. Hear all their stories on the Legends of the Old West podcast. We'll take you to Tombstone, Deadwood, and Dodge City, to the plains, mountains, and deserts for battles between the U.S. Army and Native American warriors, to dark corners for the disaster of the Donner Party, and shining summits for achievements like the Transcontinental Railroad. We'll go back to the earliest days of explorers and mountain men, and head up through notorious Pinkerton agents and gunmen like Tom Horn. Every episode features narrative writing and cinematic music, and there are hundreds of episodes available to binge. I'm Chris Wimmer. Find Legends of the Old West wherever you're listening now.
Look, we all know there are a lot of celebrity interview podcasts out there, but there's only one: Happy, Sad, Confused. I'm Josh Horowitz, and yeah, I'm the host of the show, so I'm a little biased, but truly Happy, Sad, Confused is the place for nerdy and intimate conversations with all your favorite actors and filmmakers. From Andrew Garfield and Scarlett Johansson to Christopher Nolan and Quentin Tarantino. For over 10 years and over 700 episodes, Happy, Sad, Confused has broken movie and TV news every single week. That's because I ask all the questions I want to know, and more importantly, you want to know. Casting what-ifs, backstage stories, acting pet peeves, and much more. So whether you're into superheroes, prestige TV, or just the coolest actors and directors alive, you're going to learn something in every episode. Listen to Happy, Sad, Confused on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.